Welcome to this week's edition of Flashback Friday, your opportunity to get some good review by listening to episodes from the past that Jason has handpicked to help you today in the present and propel you into the future. Enjoy.
Speakers, publishers, consultants, coaches, and info marketers unite. The Speaking of Wealth Show is your roadmap to success and significance. Learn the latest tools, technologies, and tactics to get more bookings, sell more products, and attract more clients. If you're looking to increase your direct response sales, create a big-time personal brand, and become the go-to guru, the Speaking of Wealth Show is for you. Here's your host, Jason Hartman.
Hey, it's my pleasure to welcome Michael O'Neill to the show. You may have heard his name because he is host and founder of Solopreneur Hour podcast, and he's made quite a name for himself in the world of podcasting. He's doing a great job, has a very elegant style in terms of his show and his graphics, and he's just doing a lot of good stuff. So it's a pleasure to welcome him. He's a fellow San Diegan. Michael, welcome to the show. How are you?
I've never been accused of being elegant before, so thank you, Jason.
Well, I didn't say you were, but I guess you are. You're elegant enough.
Very good. How are you?
But you've got great graphics, and just your show has just an awesome look. It's really good.
Oh, look, you like the look.
I like the look of it, yeah.
I had a great designer.
Here that is you who is the designer, right?
Yeah, that was my previous life. Before all this stuff, I was a web and branding guy and a design guy before this. So I had a little bit of a leg up in terms of creating the show and the brand and all the stuff around it, T-shirts and that kind of thing. And I'm one of those people that is really strongly opinionated that if you don't nail your brand at the beginning, it can really come back and bite you in the bum in a couple of years.
Yeah, well, that's maybe a good way to start off our conversation. Obviously, as solopreneurs and entrepreneurs in general, and even large companies, the brand is very important, especially in the angle of personal branding, which was what my first book was about 15 years ago, Become the Brand of Choice. And Michael, I have to tell you and the listeners, it's on the New York Times worst seller list.
Love it. Well done.
I'm a self-effacing author. I'm not much into book marketing, to tell you the truth.
We never would have guessed.
When did you launch the show? How old is it?
We're recording this on the 19th of August in 2015. So I had to break the fourth wall. I launched it 2 years ago in 4 days, on the 23rd of August, 2013.
Fantastic. So it is not that old, but it's been a tremendous success. Talk about the branding first. How did you decide on Solopreneur? I mean, I think you just tapped into a market that is just expanding, and it was really ripe. Did you go out there and look at other podcasts and see what they're talking about? And what did you do?
No, specifically that. I did not do that. You can tell because I think I'm a fish out of water in a lot of different areas in this. In terms of the brand part, I only knew that I wanted to do a show. I didn't know what the show was going to be specifically, and it sort of rattled around in my head for a few months. I had a guy that I was friends with that was a professional drummer. He's a great drummer, but what he really loves is teaching. That is his thing. And instead of going out and literally going on tour with some of the biggest bands in the world, which he still has the opportunity to do, he turned it down so he could start his own teaching. It's a guy named Mike Johnson. He has Mike'sLessons.com.
I was hoping you were going to say it was like Neil Peart, the drummer for Rush, but oh well.
Actually, I would prefer Mike to Neil 10 times out of 10, but that's only one drummer.
Oh my God, we're going to have an argument about this because I think Neil Peart is the most talented drummer in world history. Okay.
Well, first of all, his name is Neil Peart, which is very odd.
Yeah,
it's called Peart. But I do not share that same sentiment.
Wow.
I've been playing drums since I was a fetus.
Okay.
But I like him. Don't get me wrong. He just doesn't do much for me. He was a groundbreaker when he broke ground.
Okay.
Anyway, so we were going to do this show called Learn to Learn with Mike and Mike. That was going to be the show. It was sort of be about the learning process as entrepreneurs, as online business people. But then Mike got so incredibly popular and busy. He was on the cover of all the drum magazines. He's kind of a big deal, as they say these days. And literally ran out of time to do the show. So I didn't know what the show was going to be. But in 2010, I'd had this social media training course. I'd gone all around the country. I went to about 17 or 18 different cities in 2010 on tour with a specific network marketing company that sent me out to train the field, which are the people that use the products, in how to use social media to grow their business. And as I went through that process, I then created an online course that was basically the same idea. But as I was recording the course, it dawned on me, wait a second. This, yes, applies to people in this particular niche, but it also applies to real estate agents and actors and personal trainers and other solopreneurs. So I started using the word solopreneur instead of network marketer. And it was plug and play because all the concepts were exactly the same. And it was all about what you just alluded to, which was building a personal brand, promoting yourself via social media, but not in a, this is what I do, but more in a, I'll have what she's having, if you've seen When Harry Met Sally.
Right. So, yeah, great movie, by the way.
Great movie and great scene.
Okay, so we don't agree on the drummer, but we agree on the movie at least.
Yes,
okay.
Very good. Yeah. But yeah, so that particular scene, when I try to describe to people the proper way to market yourself via social media, go back and watch that scene and see what happens. It's not about someone telling you what they do. It's about someone showing you how great their life is while they're using whatever product or service or blah, blah, blah. So you get a lot of, I'll have what she's having. So as I went through that process, I just kept using the word solopreneur instead of, network marketer. And I was on my bike in Ocean Beach, riding up a hill. I was listening to another podcast, and someone said something like, it was like the McNeil Lear Hour or something like that.
Right, yeah.
And I said, the Solopreneur Hour. That's it. That's what I'm going to do, because it gives me an excuse to talk to not only cool online business people and authors like yourself, but also actors and comedians and anybody that sort of falls into this category of being a solopreneur. And so I jammed up and I rode right into my house and ran over to my computer and went to GoDaddy, as we all do when we have our $1 million idea. And I got my domain name and I was so excited. And then that's when the wheels really started turning. And that's when, I literally went over to Liberty Station, which is here in San Diego, with my laptop and started playing with logo ideas. And that's sort of how the brand began to evolve.
Okay, good. So that was the brand. And take us through some of your keys to success, if you will, of the podcast. It seemed to take off right away. What did you do? What were some of the good steps that you took?
I think I'd known ahead of time that I was going to do something, but I didn't know what that something was yet. I knew that I was a solopreneur because I was unemployable, and I think probably many people in this entrepreneurial world feel rather unemployable. And I think that happens when you learn a little bit too much about the industries that you're interested in, like if you are in real estate or that kind of thing. Is there any way in the world, Jason, that someone could say, hey, I want you to go work for my XYZ at this point? No way.
No.
You just go, well, I like to go to coffee shops at 10:45. What are you talking about,
Yeah.
So that part I knew. I didn't know the rest of it. And I started cultivating very intentionally relationships with people that were doing things that I liked. So I can trace a lot of my success back to Pat Flynn, who, when I was creating my first online course in 2010, I asked him a couple of very specific questions about how to launch correctly and that kind of thing, which, by the way, wasn't his wheelhouse. But he was nice enough to, after bugging him with a couple emails, he was nice enough to write me back. But more importantly, I said, Pat, would you mind introducing me to Amy Porterfield? And so he once we established a relationship, and I will say that it's important, if you're listening right now and you're like, I wish I were friends with John Lee Dumas or Gary Vaynerchuk or whatever, you need to figure out the path of least resistance to those people are. Even if it's the gatekeeper, right? Be nice to everybody. That's the big thing, is that if you're nice to everybody and you become memorable, that is a real key to building relationships. So in Pat's case, he wrote me this nice email back, and Pat was doing very well. Funny, what was very well at the time, which was, $15,000, $20,000 a month, and then John came along and ruined it for everybody. But he wrote me this nice email, suggested some things, and I wrote him back and I said, thank you so much, and here's an iTunes gift card for $20. I had like $25 at the time, and I sent him an iTunes gift card for $20. And I didn't need to do that. He didn't need the money, but it was the gesture that he would remember.
Right.
And so when the NMX conference, which was New Media Expo, Blog World, in New York happened a few months later, he took personal time and we met at a juice bar. And that really began what would become a real friendship, because he remembered me. He knew who I was. And I said, hey, remember, blah, blah, blah. We met. We had a nice thing. And then from that point, Pat, if I needed something, he was a text or a phone call away.
Just out of curiosity, when you sent him the iTunes gift card, that gesture, was it a physical card or via email?
I think it was via email.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was $20 or whatever. Yeah. It was fine. And I did something very similar with John Lee Dumas, where he took time out and met with me here in San Diego. We took a walk. He was very nice and generous with his time. When we finished that, I had just met John and Kate, and I just went to a flower shop, and I sent them a bouquet of fire-colored flowers. So orange, red,
in keeping with the theme.
Yellow. Yeah. And obviously, Kate, being the girlfriend, was like, oh my God, that was so thoughtful and blah, blah. But that really, again, planted the seeds of John and I are dear, dear, dear friends here in San Diego. And we have now a couple of big business initiatives that we're aligned on. And I think that happens because it was very intentional to cultivate the relationship. So when I launched my show, I had done that with enough people that I said, would you mind coming on the show? I was pretty strategic about when, you get about 8 weeks of extra juice from iTunes when you launch a show. And I was pretty strategic about, spreading those people out throughout the 8 weeks. So I had a lot of the heavy hitters. I was lucky enough to have Adam Carolla, who's obviously a celebrity.
That's a big guest. How do you get Adam? Good one. Good job.
We share a passion for racing vintage cars. And he was at a race that I was at. And again, same exact thing I just talked about, where I talked to the gatekeeper. I talked to his producer, who happened to be wearing a Philadelphia Flyers hat, and I'm from Philadelphia originally, and we talked a little hockey, and I said, what's it like to, do this show, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, would you mind, because Adam was 10 feet away, and I said, I'm a huge fan. I listen to the show every day. Would you mind giving me a quick intro and just introducing me? And, I've got this show, and I'd love to have him on. And so the guy brings me right up and he says, hey, this is Michael O'Neill, and he's got this great business podcast. He'd love to have you on for a few. And Adam goes, how long is your show? And I was like, an hour. He goes, how about like 20 minutes, 25 minutes? I'm like, all right, fine. We booked it, and he ended up giving me 45 minutes. It was a great conversation, but that was how it worked. It was like a relationship with the gatekeeper and then the introduction. And I will say, as just a tip, that if you're trying to get on other people's shows, getting to the gatekeepers is a great strategy. Rarely does someone write me and say, I want to be on your show, and I say yes. It's always better when I get an email from Pat or John or Amy or any of these people and say, hey, hey, this guy was a fantastic guest, very worthy of your show. Would you like to have him on? Mm-hmm. And that seems to work a lot better in both directions, not only when I want to be on someone's show, but when someone wants to be on the Solopreneur Hour.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense.
That's sort of a long thing. But the point is I launched with good people for the first, 10 weeks, mm-hmm. and they were nice enough to share the show when they came on. They were nice enough to tell their audience about it. And I think that there was a lot of initial get up and go. I think it's tougher now. I don't know if I'd be able to do it right this second.
Yeah. Well, so why do you say you don't know if you'd be able to do it right now? Because it's tougher? Because the world has become littered with podcasts. There's just too many of them.
super noisy. And I think the people that were the ones that had the biggest influence for me, some of the bigger names in sort of online business have now been on so many shows so many times.
Right.
That the allure of someone hearing an interview with them is kind of like, yeah, I've been there, done that. But also, they don't really even have an incentive to share it anymore. It's like, it's who cares?
Yeah.
So it's a tougher road to hoe unless you can really zag when the world is zigging, which is one of my favorite books, by the way.
Right. Yeah. Okay, good. Just one question for you. I like your idea of and I've heard other speakers talk about this occasionally, about find a common interest. You and Adam Carolla were at the races. Was that just a coincidence? Did you know he would be there? Did you know he had that interest beforehand, or what?
Not only did I know he was going to be there, but before I left my house, I said, I'm getting Adam Carolla on my show.
You went with real intention. That was great.
Months before, I said, this is going to be my chance. And I'll tell you what I did, actually. We did that. We did the show. It was awesome. The next time he was at this same exact event, I went and bought a 12-pack of beer. And I brought it the minute he got off of the track for his practice runs. He's sweating. You're in a full, race suit. It's September in California. It's hot. And I came in with a 12-pack and I said, hey, man, I don't know if you remember. You were on my show last year. I just wanted to bring you this and say thank you. And he split it with everybody. Again, same relationship building idea, So now if he has a new movie or something that comes out, I can say, hey, if you want, pop back on the show. I'm the guy that bought you the 12-pack. I just want to be remembered by them. I don't necessarily want to butter it up. But I just got back from a 5-day conference here in San Diego, and I will say that one of the biggest mistakes I think we make as entrepreneurs, especially when we go to these conferences all the time, right? Everyone's learning and going to podcast movement, or they're going to FinCon or whatever, that they don't go in with a plan. You got to walk into that conference center with, okay, this is what I want to get out of this conference. And if you don't have that, then it's, you're going home, you're on the plane on Tuesday, and you're kind of like, I had a couple of great drinks and some laughs with some people, saw a couple of good sessions, but what did I really get out of this? So for me, in this last conference, it took me a day or two to go, what do I want out of this? This is the 7th time I've been to this particular conference. My situation has changed, so now I have this platform of a show. And if I want to sort of build this type of business, how do I do that? It's more about, for me, like time management. Eventually I landed on, all right, so what's the best way for me to onboard people? I'm going to connect with other people on my team to see what their system is so I can plug people into their system. And that's what I landed on. And now that ended up being a hugely successful conference for me. I came out with an exact strategy of what I want to do with this business on the way out.
Okay, so a lot of your story is talking about the launch. And so you met some great people, you made some contacts. I mean, before that, you were a nobody, right? Nobody knew you. You were just listening to podcasts, and you had your graphic design career, right? And then suddenly you're all connected.
Yeah, so, I suppose I was a nobody. Thank you.
I didn't mean to say it in a negative way.
No, thank you so much.
You were a nobody in the podcasting world, right?
Oh, yeah, in the podcast world, not at all. I mean, yeah, so the reality is, yes, I was totally a nobody. I had seen a little bit of success from this previous, social media training thing I was doing, where I ended up on stage and I was training, and I said, ooh, this feels right. This feels like home for me. I didn't even know I knew how to do this, right? And I think that's coming from like being a drummer for a lot of my life and not being afraid to be on stages. And all of a sudden I was comfortable with people and eyeballs. And I think I've always been a bit of a show off too. And I don't mean that in a negative connotation, but I was like a BMX kid, a freestyle kid, and I always perform better with eyeballs on me, which is really crazy. You should see the bedroom. No, I'm kidding.
Well, it makes you accountable to yourself,
Yeah, and it really ups my game, and there's adrenaline, and there's...
Yeah, makes sense.
So I think when that happened, I didn't know what I would do with it yet. So I'm on stage and I'm training. This is how you use Facebook and, blah, blah, blah. And people are loving it, and we get off stage and you can't get through a room because everyone's asking you questions. And you really feel like the man, right? It's a very sort of ego boosting activity. But beyond that, I loved the emails I would get a few days later that said, oh my gosh, I did the thing you said and look what happened. I loved that. So there was a real pride in the teaching part that I enjoyed, but I didn't really know there was a platform for it. And what I did is there was a guy that I knew who ironically happens to be today's guest on the Solopreneur Hour, that he came to me with a YouTube question because I knew a lot about social media. And I said, I've seen you speak in front of 10,000 people and the room has been dead silent, like dug in to what you're saying. It's pretty easy to get a room to yell. It's hard to get a whole room to be dead quiet, right? And so I said, we should really think about growing your brand. So this is my background, right? I go, and he goes, how do we do that? I go, well, you should do a podcast. And he goes, what's a podcast? I'm like, oh, it's like a radio show, So we launched a show in 2012 called The Kick-Ass Life with David Wood. And that was the first real exposure I had to being behind the scenes and being the producer and watching a platform so rapidly grow because of the medium. The show was great. We did it well. I had all my branding stuff that I do. And we did a great intro and the sound quality was awesome. And he was great on the mic. And so the show was a hit. And for a year and a half, I saw the power of podcasting. And that's really where I think it planted the seed for me to go, and it was weird. This is actually a little psychology moment. I was not comfortable in the spotlight because as a drummer, I'm hiding behind wood and metal on a stage.
Right.
And in fact,
you maybe get a podium as a speaker, mostly not though.
Right. But even for the shows when we would do like a small trio show at a small club and I would have to turn my drums sideways because that was the best way it would fit on stage, it would be way more nerve-wracking.
So now felt too exposed, huh?
Yeah, I just look to my left and I've got people. People are right there. So that made me like a little bit nervous, and now I prefer that. I prefer
I love public speaking.
Idea.
I mean, it's just a blast. I will say, when I give full day or a full weekend seminar, mean, it is tiring.
Oh my goodness.
But it's like a labor of love. I just love doing it. I love hearing all the success stories afterwards of people who implement things, and it's a great thing. It sort of surprises me that anybody's actually really nervous or fearful of it. It's wonderful, you know.
And they really, really, really are. They are very, very nervous. Most are very nervous about it. We have such a fear of letting people down. We have a fear of being judged. And that is so strange. One of my friends, who's a really amazing speaker, in fact, he was the first guy to speak at Columbine after the tragedy there. He does a part in his show where he's speaking to, like, let's say a room full of insurance people, 500 insurance people. And he'll say, hey, who can draw me a picture? And like 1 or 2 people out of the 500 will raise their hand. And then he'll say, who can sing me a song? And the same. He'll get like 1 or 2 people that'll raise their hand. And then he said, well, here's the strange part, is that if I asked those 2 same questions to a room full of third graders, every hand would have gone up.
Yeah, right. We get more fearful and less adventurous as we age, right?
That's a learned process that we get so nervous about these things because we used to not care about being judged. You were just a little kid.
Yeah.
By the way, think about how the world reacts when a little kid sings or draws a picture. They love it. Mm-hmm. So the fear that we make around putting ourselves out there as an entrepreneur is so sort of contrived in our brain, and that fear of failure is so strong that it causes most people never to take action. Mm-hmm. That's the real crutch of being an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, is the lack of taking action.
Well, what do they say? Fear is false evidence appearing real, or false education appearing real. There's many variations on that acronym. But, you know, that's really true, because this is invented. We invent this fear, right? It doesn't really exist. You gave the example of the kids versus the adult. It's a good point.
Most people are waiting for somebody else to go first.
Yeah. Right.
And that's the truth. When you think about just the little things that happen, try this. For the next time you're on an elevator, and I've just spent now 5 days on a million elevators.
Look the other way? Is that what you're going to say?
No, it's so weird what happens on an elevator. You're standing a foot away from another human being. You don't say a word to each other. Right. You're sort of just finding a place to. It's almost like being at the urinal when you're a guy. In the,
right.
Try next time you're on an elevator. I want you guys to all try this. Just as soon as you walk in, you couple things. You just go, "Hey, how's your day going? How are things?" Right? Mm-hmm. Or if there's a bunch of people
will think you're a weirdo.
Or they won't. Or they'll go, "Thank goodness somebody broke the weird tension on this elevator." And so what I would do is, if I was the one on the elevator ahead of time and people would come piling in, I'd say, "Hey, welcome to the elevator. It's the best one." You know, and then we'd go, and then, you know, and people would start, you know, I said, "This has got the best ride. You have no idea. It goes straight up and down, and it goes like the 4th floor. You should see it. The door's going to open. It's magical. All of a sudden, you're on another floor." Right. And I would say something like that, and people would laugh. "Oh, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah." We get up, "Okay, have a nice day. Have a nice day." And the tension was completely broken. So if you are nervous about public speaking, use the elevator. This is true. Use the elevator as the beginning of your getting over your fear. Just say hello to the people that are on the elevator and look up. Look up and look at them instead of looking down at your phone or leaning against or looking at the door. You're staring at a door, and there's a human right next to you.
I know. It's a strange part of human behavior. You're absolutely right.
It really is.
Yeah, it is.
Of all this, like the way we could summarize this, the elevator nervousness, and by the way, doesn't exist in lines as much. So if you're like at a line at, you know, IKEA waiting for your meatballs or something, often you'll talk to the person next to you. It's very strange that it's the elevator that really brings us into this weird social nervousness.
It does. It's weird. I agree.
Yeah.
Any other tips you want to share about podcasting? And what do you teach in SoloLab? That's your kind of mastermind group, right? Is that the right way to refer to it?
Well, I mean, you're getting a lot of it. So I feel like becoming a successful solopreneur takes a number of different steps. It's establishing relationships. It's learning about the thing you want to learn. It's taking action. You know, it's giving back. You have to sort of do these in order to become a successful solopreneur. So what I like to do is take a lot of the social discomfort and get people over them. Because, you know, as you and I know, you've trained hundreds and hundreds of people, it's not the technical side that hangs most people up, right? I can teach someone how to talk into a microphone or something like that. But it's the mindset that, is it okay if I do that? Why would someone listen to me? It's like you have to get them through the right mindset. So that's a big struggle for people. And I think not having a lot of extra money. We surround ourselves with people that maybe are negative. You don't have the right support around this. And I think being a solopreneur, entrepreneur does require support from inside. You need like a supportive spouse or a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, friends around you. And if you've got a bunch of naysayer friends that are like, I don't know why you're doing this, you just go get a job, you're never going to really be as successful as you would be. So what I would do is when I had very little money, this is like one of my best hacks that I ever came up with. You guys ready? This is
we're listening. Yeah.
World-class hack. And in fact...
It better be good. You've built it up a lot.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. You live right around La Jolla, right?
Yep.
You ever go out to any restaurants or happy hours or anything in La Jolla?
Sure.
Where do you go?
Well, there's Beaumont's right down the street. I've been there many times. And
a lot of music at Beaumont's.
Yep. And then there's some places in Pacific Beach. And
what about right in La Jolla, like in the thick of things in La Jolla?
Well, in the Village, gosh, I can't even remember the names. Well, George's, of course, is great.
That's
I love
exactly
George's.
What I was fishing for George's.
But the last place I went, I can't remember, and it wasn't George's, but it was good. No,
well,
I don't know the name.
I was fishing for George's.
Okay, George's, go for it.
So George's is a beautiful restaurant. It's got 2 stories. They are both literally right on the water. They've got a rooftop deck that's gorgeous. And when you go to a happy hour at George's, it's, of course, the beautiful people, but it's also a ton of super successful people. And the reason why is because they live in La Jolla. And then George's is a nice restaurant in La Jolla. So that's where they're going to congregate. What I would do when I had, $10 to my name, when I was living in Denver, I had no money. I would go to Cherry Creek, which is the nicest neighborhood in Denver. I would go to the George's equivalent for happy hour. And I would get 1 glass of wine, and I'd put my laptop up on the counter about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, have this glass of wine next to me, and I would do a couple hours of work. And what would happen is the most successful people in the Denver or San Diego area would surround me for 2 or 3 hours. And because I was working on my stuff, inevitably, somebody would walk up and say, and usually this would happen 4 times a night, what are you doing? What are you working on? I've never seen anybody sort of working at a happy hour before. What do you got going on? And we'd begin a conversation. And after a few minutes, they would say, wait a second, this guy's got some hustle. There's something about this dude. Because I think successful people can recognize hustle and they recognize success. And I would get invites. Hey, do you want to come join us for dinner? We're having a party at this golf course. Would you like to come on my boat? So I've ended up at parties on multi-million-dollar yachts. I've been at country clubs. I've been at golf games with multi-millionaire CEOs because of this exact technique. So if you are surrounding yourself with a bunch of negative friends and they don't get it, don't go to the Starbucks on the poor side of town. Go to the nicest coffee shop in the nicest part of town. Then go to a happy hour at a beautiful hotel restaurant or the George's equivalent, whatever the fancy restaurant is, Morton's Steakhouse or something, and work on your laptop. You'll get to know the bartenders, and more importantly, you'll get to know the people that are really moving and shaking in your industry or in your neighborhood, and watch the doors that will open. And that'll cost you like $10.
Well, maybe 15 at George's for one drink, but
and plus tip.
It's close enough, yeah. I got to ask you about that. You had mentioned that before, and I kind of thought about it afterwards, and I thought, well, isn't that sort of antisocial to be sitting there with a laptop? No one else has their laptops. I mean, at a coffee shop, yes, that's sort of normal behavior. But I just can't imagine that at George's or some, swanky place for happy hour.
Well, think about what you just said. Yeah. Put it this way. There's 100 beautiful women wearing little black dresses and 1 woman wearing a red dress. Who are you going to go talk to? Well, so it's okay to not be...
I don't know. The little black dress is a standard. It's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But you're going to notice the red dress. Yeah. That's the Matrix.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
The woman... Did you see the woman in the red dress, right?
Well, there's a song about that, Lady in Red.
That's right. So when you go to a place like that and you're on your laptop, it's different enough that someone goes, what are you doing? What are you working on here? The proof's in the pudding. It's happened to me so many times. I could do it today and doors would open. It's a way to sort of surround yourself with huge success without necessarily having the money or having to be that successful yourself.
Yeah, yeah. We live in a world where all of these successful people and all of these great ideas and all this great information is accessible to everybody. You know, the world is flat, and so it's much more democratic. Everybody has access now, so there's really little, if any, excuse for not engaging and getting access to these people and these ideas, because they're out there. They're all accessible now.
You've got to get out of your house. That's the main thing.
Right.
Is you can't just, I mean, it's great to have a home office. It's great to be like hustling and focusing on your thing. You have to get to events. You have to get out in the world. So if there are networking events, go to them. If you want to do this technique, go to them. If there are industry events like seminars and things like that, you have to go to them, because the deals that are done, they don't happen necessarily online. I met Pat Flynn because I went to an event that I heard about from his show, and I made a special appointment to spend 20, 30 minutes with him. If I hadn't done that, I have no idea where I would have been today. I can trace it back to sort of that one. Actually, I can trace the Solopreneur Hour back to a lunch that I had with Pat Flynn here in San Diego, where he and I talked for 2 hours. We just hung out. A couple of dudes talked about our relationships, and we talked about men's fashion, and we talked about cars, and we just hung out for 2 hours. And he left and he said, dude, thank you. I never get to do that. When I'm home, I'm with my kids, talking to my wife. When I'm on other people's shows, I'm just talking about smart passive income. That's all I do. I never get to just hang out and talk about the rest of my life. And I thought, what an interesting idea for a show. And that was where the Solopreneur Hour was really born.
Yeah, right. Because you talk about the sort of the life behind the person, right? Well,
yeah.
every other show is talking about, what do you do? What's your business? Kind of like the stuff we've been talking about, frankly.
Yeah.
My show's included in the every other show category.
Well, but that's people like it. They like it.
Yeah,
but that's the difference for me.
Yeah.
You do it in a way. You have good conversational quality. You've got a good following. You've been doing this for a long time. When I got into podcasting, nobody was doing a show like mine.
Right.
For whatever reason, they just weren't. But I said, I can fill that because I have a sort of a background in conversation. I can probably do that show well, whereas others would have to really kind of learn the art of the dance of conversation. You're very good at it, Jason. So you can definitely do that show. You can hang your hat high, my friend. Hang your head high, right?
There you go. Where can people find you and learn more? I mean, anybody can Google Solopreneur Hour, obviously, Twitter, etc.
They can just go to George's. No,
George's for happy hour, sure. Yeah.
After this conference, I'm not drinking the rest of my life. I decided no. Well, because no one can spell preneur, I shorten all my stuff to solohour.com. Solohour.com. It's at SoloHour on Twitter. I'm putting a lot of effort into Instagram right now. So at SoloHour on Instagram. I've been doing these really great inspirational quotes and things like that every day on my Instagram account. Yeah, and then SoloLab, the same deal. If you want to check out my coaching group, it's iwantsololab.com.
Excellent. Well, Michael O'Neill, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today and joining us on the show. It was great talking with you, and keep up the good work.
I really, really appreciate the chance and the opportunity to be on your show. Thanks, Jason.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. Thanks for joining us.
This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company, all rights reserved. For distribution or publication rights and media interviews, please visit www.hartmanmedia.com or email media@hartmanmedia.com. Nothing on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and the host is acting on behalf of Platinum Properties Investor Network, Inc. exclusively.